Hi there. My name is Michael Shuman, and I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C., where I live. I wish I could be with you in London today, but this is the next best thing. And as someone who's been active in the International Alliance for Localization since its inception, I am really pleased that this gathering is happening and that, at least in this modest way, I can participate. I want to share with you some of my own thinking and experiences with respect to local business, local food, and local finance. Uh, Many of you who know my books know that for the last 20 years or so, I have been deeply involved in trying to understand and make the case for the spread of local businesses. And I have to say that we have largely won the argument. There is now an incredible amount of evidence that has been published in the United States that shows that locally owned businesses are truly the key to prosperity. For example, there was a study published in the Harvard Business Review in the summer of 2010, and it's a regression analysis looking at communities throughout North America. And what it found is that in those communities with the highest density of locally owned business, there's the highest per capita job growth rate. And not just that, but in another study that was published by the Federal Reserve of Atlanta, Federal Reserve is our monetary authority, they found that those communities with the highest density of locally owned business had the highest per capita income growth rate. So, in other words, the best way of raising prosperity and getting rid of poverty is to spread locally owned business. We also have really compelling really compelling evidence that locally owned business is highly competitive. We can see that over the last 10 years, generally speaking, the market share that locally owned businesses have had of the economy, which is over 50%, has not changed. We also know that these businesses are highly profitable. We have some evidence, for example, from Canada, from Stats Canada, that shows that when you look at Canadian businesses, the most profitable businesses have 10 to 20 employees. The least profitable businesses are those with over 500 employees, some of which are traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Now, we know this is also true of local food businesses, that local food businesses can be an incredible driver of economic development. In 2010, I did a study for Metro Cleveland with two other scholars, and we looked at the impact of a 25% shift toward local food in the Metro Cleveland area. And what we found is that if you could shift demand 25% to local food, you could create 27,000 new jobs, enough in principle to reemploy 1 out of every 7 unemployed workers, enough to generate nearly $1 billion in new wages, and something that would generate another $125 million of tax revenue for the local and state governments. Local food businesses are probably the most important entry point that communities make into the local economy. It makes sense. We sort of viscerally understand the value of local food. But we also know that local food businesses can and are enormously competitive. Another study I did around 2010 with Winrock International called Community Food Enterprise. We looked at 24 local food businesses all around the world, and we found incredible models of competitiveness. And it's worth mentioning here that, we totally misunderstand the theory of economies of scale. We often assume that larger and larger scales become more competitive, but that's not the theory. The theory is that you become larger up to a point and achieve some economies of scale, but at some point, diseconomies of scale kick in. This is the case with food businesses. We know that food businesses of small or modest size actually can be incredibly competitive. One reason is they deliver more quality food. They can deliver it faster. They can deliver it cleaner. They can deliver it with lower distribution infrastructure. An interesting study in the United States looks at a food dollar spent in the year 1900 and the year 2000. In the year 1900, a typical food dollar, 40 cents of that dollar went to the farmer, and the rest went to inputs for the farming and the distribution. Today, if you look at that dollar, 7 cents goes to the farmer and more than 70 cents goes to distribution. And by distribution, I mean things like retail markup, insurance, transportation, packaging, refrigeration, things that have nothing to do with food. Whenever you get a distribution component that is significantly larger and more expensive than the production component for a given product, it makes sense to localize. And that is one of the factors that is driving food localization all over the world. Now, that is the good news. The bad news is that even when you have a compelling economic case for the spread of local food, even when you have entrepreneurs who want to start local food businesses and consumers who want to buy it, you still may not execute a lot of change. The reason is capital. You need capital to grow and expand a new sector of the economy. How are we going to get capital into local food businesses? One of the things that I do with audiences is I often ask 3 questions. And I say, by show of hands, how many people have mindfully bought something local over the last week? And usually all the people raise their hands. Then I ask, how many of you do your banking at a local bank or credit union? Again, most of the hands go up. And then I ask, those of you with pension funds, how many of you have your pension funds in small business that grow your economy? And all the hands go down. And this is shocking because what it shows is that in most industrial countries, we are systematically overinvesting in global business and underinvesting in local business, even though these businesses are the majority of our economy, highly competitive, and highly profitable. Now, there's a reason for this, and I believe the reason can be summed up in 2 words: investment apartheid. Back in the 1930s and 40s, most industrial countries passed securities laws. These laws were designed to protect consumers and investors, but in fact, they have been used to protect global business. The way that securities laws operate is there are 2 classes of citizens. There's the rich, say the top 1 to 5% of wealth in the country. Those individuals are allowed to invest in anything, anytime, no questions asked. The other 95+% can only invest in a local business, even a penny, if they do $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 of legal work, legal disclosures. That number is so high that very, very few local businesses are willing to open themselves up to grassroots investment. So this is why securities laws have to be changed. In the United States, many of us embarked on the quest to do this almost a decade ago. Some of the work that we did, some of the work that I did, culminated in an article that I wrote for a journal of the Federal Reserve, this one, the San Francisco branch, in 2009. And I argued that there ought to be a $100 exemption in securities law. That is, anyone should be able to write a $100 check and invest it or lend it to a local business, no questions asked, no legal paperwork, a lawyer-free zone. Well, what happened next was quite remarkable. Friends of mine wrote a rulemaking petition to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Hundreds of letters poured in. And what did the Securities and Exchange Commission do about this? Absolutely nothing. Flash forward to 2011, and there is a hearing on Capitol Hill about changes in securities laws. And Tea Party Republicans have dragged before the committee the head of the SEC and basically has asked her whatever became of that $100 proposal. And she hemmed and hawed and said, well, we get these ridiculous proposals for reform all the time, and maybe we'll convene a committee to look at this, but this really isn't a priority. The committee went ballistic because at this point, unemployment in the United States was about 10%, very high for us. We knew that local businesses are the only generators of new employment, and she was essentially saying, I'm sorry, local businesses don't matter. That committee turned around and voted unanimously, not for a $100 exemption, but a $10,000 exemption. This then moved to the Senate, got whittled down to $2,000, and then President Obama signed this crowdfunding law called the Jobs Act in April 2012. What happened next was equally extraordinary because the SEC was supposed to implement this law by the end of 2012. And it suddenly became clear that they were going to do everything they could to delay rules and thwart the implementation of the law. So at the state level, we decided to have a revolt. And one by one, states passed their own version of the Jobs Act. And at this point, 31 states have done so. It was enough to put pressure on the SEC to do their job, and they finally did it. So that in May of this year, the Jobs Act was finally implemented. So now we have two sets of laws that facilitate at a very low cost people being able to put money into local business, a federal law and a bunch of state laws. Now, it's one thing to pass these laws, it's another thing to actually use them. So the next stage we realize is to educate people on how to invest locally and educate businesses to start creating local securities. And there are stages beyond that we realize need to happen. We need to create local exchanges for people to buy and sell their securities. We need to create local investment funds so that if you don't have time to shop around yourself, there's an investment advisor out there who's creating a diversified pool of local businesses. And we need to make it easier for pension funds to put money into these businesses, into these funds. One of the next stages that I see happening in all of this can be found in Canada. In fact, there's a couple of reforms that I've seen in Canada that I think are quite exciting and are worth our thinking about. In the province of Alberta, you are able to create a cooperative whose mission it is to invest in local business. In the province of Nova Scotia, you can create grassroots investment funds where people put their pension money in. And for example, in a fund called FarmWorks, you can put your money in local food businesses and small farmers. And in the province of New Brunswick, you get a 50% tax credit on every dollar you put into local business as an investor. These are the kinds of reforms that I think we need to start pushing worldwide to affect the local investment revolution and the local food revolution. At the end of the day, it is not enough to occupy Wall Street. We have to replace it. Thank you very much.